The even better approach, so we said you started with the threat modeling. Even better approach is actually to adopt a framework. There are application security frameworks that you could use for free. Some of them you could buy. And the good thing about framework is it gives you an end-to-end guide. So these are series of controls or like questions that you need to ask yourself, and it really guides you how to run the software development in your organization. For example, questions like how do you evaluate the requirements, the business requirements? Did you consider regulatory requirements as well? Let's say if you're building a system that would engage the customer or would allow the customer to pay for the products online. So are you so then it will become like a SOX relevant application. And if you're collecting customer data, then it will be a GDPR relevant application in within Europe. And those regulations, they have requirements as well, what you needed to be added to your application. And of course, you try to evaluate from your threat modeling, try to evaluate what could go wrong. And for that, you need to add the security requirements. So every framework would give you a guide what you need to do on the development phase, on the planning phase. How do you bring that to the production or to the operations? One example is OWASP, SAM version 2. It has like a tree maturity model. This is a development paradigm, and it supports both waterfall and agile. There's also BISM. BISM is actually very interesting. It has a collection of real world data from 130 organizations in 9 vertical industries. So you have there what they put together actually the things that organizations have already tried, and they put together which one of them works, you know. So what happened there is like they say the smart people, they learn from their mistakes, and the smarter one learns from the mistake of others. So if you have those put together already for you, you don't need to make the same mistakes that they do. You just try what actually work, and if it works for you and if it's something that you could also improve, then you can share it back to the community. The ISM application security framework, it gives us 27 good practice guidelines actually. And it's so structured and comprehensive, and it has an iterative approach as well. So you could use any of this. Bottom line, you do threat modeling, you adapt an application security frameworks. And we want to present to you actually an even better one, because we in Digital, we develop our own application security framework. And it's coming from what we saw as best in all those frameworks that we presented recently, or we just presented in the previous slides. And I would like to discuss further our application security framework. For those of you who are already familiar with the DevOps Infinity Loop, we adapted that loop because uh, we think that it's really the way to go. That you need to keep the infinity loop between the dev and the ops, and because we're talking about application security, we want to embed security in every step or every phase of that infinity loop. So if you start on the development side, when you plan, for example, what we put in the framework would be controls to evaluate your requirements, how you define the business requirements, that you need to include compliance requirements, and then you need to include the security requirements based on the abuse cases. So you get that from your threat modeling and from your secure architecture practices as well. That we have there, you need to develop as early as the design or planning phase the test plan. How do you test eventually that you have complied or that you have achieved the business requirements, that you have achieved the compliance requirements and the security requirements? The next phase is the create or the build phase. And for that, we would include controls like secure repository and secure build. Where do you keep your design while you are developing it? Do you keep a version of it so that you can easily roll back to the previous version if the current one that you're working is not good? And how you manage defects, also how you separate development environments from the production environment, because if you're just developing or trying something, you should not be doing that in a working or production environment. And it's also important practice to use dummy data when you're just developing or testing something, because production data are actual data of customers or live people, actual financial transactions, for example, and you should not be uh, working on that in your development environment. If you must, then you need to provide additional security protection to that development environment as well. We go to the verify. This is where you test what you have done so far. Like there are tools and automation, and what we want to emphasize here as well is if you identify the tool, you look for the tools that are already automated and that you can already integrate in your CI/CD pipeline, because it will save you time actually if you could find something that you could already integrate, because it's unlike you're coding or you're building something in this system, for example, and then you need to bring it back to test. So it saves you time if you have the tool that's already integrated and you can do the tests in the same development environment. So those are the things that we want to emphasize in the framework. And also that this create and verify should be a continuous loop. And in there, you need to do continuous risk assessment, continuous trust assessment. You achieve that by using tools, and of course, you develop a mindset that you need to test what you have done in different ways. So you do a static code analysis, you do dynamic code analysis, you use IaaS as well. So these are the things that you need to continuously do and you continuously develop. And also an important phase is the pre-production. And this is before you release it to the production. This is where you do end-to-end testing. This is where you do penetration testing, especially for internet facing or customer facing application. And this is where you identify compensating measures. Why you need to do that. There's no such thing as completely secure application. You cannot do everything in the development. So some applications, especially if you just bought a ready-made software and then you just need to adapt it to your business, normally there are limitations to that. So, for example, they cannot do multi-factor authentication, and you want to implement multi-factor authentication. So you try to identify compensating measures. This is where defense in depth takes comes into play, because you don't just the things that you cannot secure in the software itself, you can maybe compensate by the right configuration of the host. So when you release the application, for example, to the ops, you tell them that, okay, for this web server, I need you to disable this number of ports because we would not be using them. You need to disable, for example, the weak ciphers. Or if you say, well, we need to accommodate low end devices and therefore we need to accommodate even the weak cipher. But since we are doing that, we need to be more vigilant in terms of monitoring. Then you need to identify to the ops what needs to be monitored. You pass the logs to the operations so that when we detect some abnormalities or some activities, we can easily respond to it. The objective in the monitoring or in the ops is to trap abuse cases in real time. If you're able to detect the if you're able to detect some anomalies in 1 week, try to achieve it. You can detect it in 3 days, or at least in 1 day, or within the hour for some financial transactions. You do that by also doing a continuous loop between monitoring and respond, and you need to sit down to evaluate what we can improve. Maybe there's something that you could pass again to the development team, and maybe they could adjust it to the next version of the software. So this is how we want to guide organizations to have an application security in there, to achieve a secure software development life cycle. And as you would also notice, we have surrounded the infinity loops with a scaled agile framework. So wherein again you leverage on the team and technical agility, and that would lead you to have agile product delivery. You can expect to develop on cadence and release on demand, and that's what you where you achieve, or how you achieve enterprise solution delivery, and you achieve organizational agility as well. An agile organization is able to respond quickly to opportunities and threats. So this framework is something that we would dig deeper in our succeeding webinars, and I hope uh, you like the idea, and then you understood, at least you pick up something where you could actually work on.